Jasmine Crockett asked security to play Barron Trump. Then he did this. Jasmine Crockett leaned into her mic with a smirk. The TV lights shimmered across her sharp suit. Well, she teased voice cool if it isn't Barron Trump, the kid who isn't supposed to be here. Her tone dripped with challenge. The studio audience tensed. The host cleared his throat uncertain. Barron sat mid-stage, calm and collected. He wore a navy blazer over a crisp white shirt. No ties, no scripts. His father's name was enough. The applause wasn't. Jasmine spread her arms. This is a serious discussion, she said. Judicial reform demands expertise, not name recognition. A ripple of laughter followed. Barron paused, eyes steady on her. He stood. He waited for the apology she refused to give. Instead, she raised an eyebrow. Barron, she said slowly, this platform is for adults, not for political stunts. Silence dropped. The cameras zoomed in. Then Barron spoke. Short, clear, poised. Ma'am, I'm not a stunt. The words hung. They carried weight she didn't expect. In 1 minute, he continued. I'll say something real. Jasmine laughed a cold sound. Let's see, kid. He smiled politely, no anger. The host leaned forward. The lights dimmed a bit. Time slowed. Barron took a breath. Judicial reform matters. It matters to people who need justice. He looked at Jasmine. But more than that, it matters how we speak to each other. She shifted unsteady. Barron's voice stayed firm. Sometimes he added a different voice can reset a room. He paused. Scores of viewers leaned into their screens. Barron didn't need pressure. He created space. He looked at Jasmine again. If I don't get 1 minute, then we lose that chance. A ripple of applause came from the audience. Not loud, but enough. Jasmine's composure flickered. She cleared her throat, straightened her papers. Fine, she said. Clipped. 1 minute. Make it count. Barron nodded. The host checked the timer. Barron raised his chin. Honest. Grounded. His voice softened. I grew up hearing people shout. Opinion over fact. Noise over reason. But shouting doesn't fix injustice. He glanced at Jasmine. It divides. It can't build. The room held its breath. Lights hovered over both of them. The host whispered, Go ahead. Barron began again. Justice starts with listening, with respect. That's the core of reform. Jasmine frowned. He sounded too adult, too balanced. Barron continued, If we send 1 minute to hear each person, maybe we'll learn something. Maybe we'll stop letting anger take the stage. In that second, the mood changed. The audience leaned forward. Viewers at home paused scrolling. Barron held out his hands, open. I'm not asking for applause, he said. Just a minute. That's enough. He stepped back. The minute was up. The timer beeped softly. He didn't wait for more. He nodded at Jasmine. Thank you, and sat. Silence followed. Cameras stayed fixed. Jasmine swallowed. Her notes felt heavy. The moment didn't belong to either of them. It belonged to everyone watching. The studio was frozen for a beat after Barron sat down. His words, simple and deliberate, hung in the air longer than anyone expected. The audience, once leaning toward Jasmine's sharp confidence, was leaning toward him now. The host shifted in his seat, glancing nervously between them, sensing the mood shift. Jasmine adjusted her notes, but her hands moved quicker than usual, a crack in her armor. She forced a smile. Well, she said into her mic, Thank you for your input. Barron. The pause after his name was loaded with condescension, but Barron didn't react. He remained composed, hands resting lightly on his lap, eyes meeting hers without a flicker of resentment. The audience began murmuring. One woman near the front whispered to her friend, Did you hear what he said? That didn't sound like some rich kid posturing. Another man, arms crossed at the back, frowned. He had come ready to dismiss Barron, but found himself unexpectedly listening. Jasmine sensed this shift. She straightened her shoulders and raised her voice just slightly. Let's be clear. She said, leaning forward into her mic, Judicial reform isn't solved by polite words from a privileged seat. This is about people who've suffered. People who don't have time for niceties or pretty speeches. The audience clapped. But the clapping was softer now, less confident, more automatic. Barron tilted his head. His expression was calm, even curious. He spoke again gently. "Representative Crockett," he said, his voice carrying without effort, "you're right. Suffering is real, and those who suffer deserve justice." A pause. "But how do we get there," he continued, "if we can't even respect one another when we disagree?" That sentence landed like a stone in water. Ripples of unease spread through the studio audience. Even viewers at home felt it, the sudden heaviness in the conversation. Jasmine leaned back, trying to reclaim ground. "You're young," she said sharply. "You don't know this struggle." Barron smiled faintly, but didn't flinch. "You're right again," he said. "I don't know every struggle, but I know what it looks like when people stop listening because of who's speaking. That happens everywhere." The camera zoomed in, capturing his face, young but grounded, polite but unwavering. "I'm not here to pretend I have the answers," Barron added. "I'm here because I care about how we talk about the answers." The host tried to interject but couldn't find the right moment. The tension between Jasmine and Barron was magnetic. The audience couldn't look away. Jasmine exhaled slowly. Her voice dropped in tone. "This isn't about polite discourse, Barron. It's about action. Real change. We don't need reminders about manners. We need policies." That brought stronger applause. Jasmine regained a thread of control. Barron didn't argue. He nodded slowly, acknowledging her point. Then he spoke again. "I agree that action is what matters," he said simply. "But the tone we set here in front of this audience, in front of the nation, also matters." A man in the third row nodded slowly. A woman near the aisle whispered to her friend, "He's not even defensive. That's refreshing." Jasmine's jaw tightened. She was a skilled debater. She was used to shutting opponents down with facts, figures, passion. But this wasn't a typical opponent. Barron wasn't arguing. He was reflecting. That unsettled her more than a direct challenge would have. Behind the cameras, producers gestured frantically. The control room showed social media feeds lighting up. Comments poured in. "Barron's making sense. Didn't expect to respect him today." This is what political conversation should sound like. A producer whispered in the host's earpiece, "Let it play out." Ratings are spiking. Jasmine saw the change too, body language in the audience, the shift in energy. She leaned forward and delivered what she thought would be the closing line. "I fight for justice," she said, voice firm, not civility. Because civility has never protected marginalized communities. It was a strong line, a true line. Applause erupted from her side of the audience, but it didn't erase what Barron had introduced. He didn't rise from his seat, he didn't gesture dramatically. But his voice, calm and measured, reached across the applause. Maybe he said softly, but shouting alone won't protect them either. That silenced the room again. Jasmine turned toward him fully now, less as a dismissive opponent, more as someone realizing she couldn't brush him off. Barron continued, "Justice needs more than volume. It needs persistence. But it also needs enough trust that people on all sides will stay in the room and keep talking." A ripple of murmurs spread again. A man near the back clapped slowly. Another woman in the middle row followed suit. Jasmine's supporters clapped too, but the applause felt fractured, uncertain. Barron didn't press further. He simply folded his hands on his lap again. The host, sensing a moment, leaned in at last. "Representative Crockett," he said gently, "would you like to respond?" Jasmine hesitated. That hesitation was rare for her. She straightened again. "I respect anyone who shows up and speaks calmly," she said, her tone careful now, "but calm words don't erase injustice." Barron nodded. "True." And then he added quietly, "But neither does ignoring calm words just because of where they come from." That line wasn't loud, but it resonated. The audience stayed quiet for a long beat, absorbing it. Somewhere backstage, a staffer watching the social media feeds muttered he just won them. In the control room, the show's executive producer smiled faintly. Whatever was planned for this interview, it was already out the window. Barron Trump had walked in as a wild card, but he had stayed as something more a reminder that tone, respect, and presence could reshape a room, even a room primed for confrontation. And Jasmine Crockett knew it too. She saw it in the audience's eyes. As the cameras rolled, Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, searching for an opening. She wasn't one to retreat, especially not on live television, especially not with millions watching. She had built her reputation on strength and clarity, and yet Barron Trump's soft-spoken presence had subtly disarmed the entire room. The studio felt different now, quieter yet heavier. Each word mattered more. The audience who had arrived ready to cheer her fierce voice for justice now sat reflective, their applause scattered unsure. Jasmine inhaled slowly. "Barron," she began, voice sharp but measured, "the problem is this. People like you, people born into wealth, can afford to talk about tone and civility. But for so many of us, civility has long been weaponized to keep us quiet." A fresh wave of applause rose from one side of the studio. Barron nodded slowly. He wasn't rushed. "That's fair," he replied. "I don't pretend to understand every experience." His eyes met hers directly. "But isn't that the point of listening? Especially when we disagree." That answer didn't ignite applause, but it didn't invite jeers either. It made the audience think. The host leaned back slightly, giving space for this unexpected dialogue to continue. Jasmine tapped her notes nervously. "Listening isn't enough," she said. "We need action. Words polite or loud aren't fixing, the courts aren't reforming the system, aren't saving lives." Barron tilted his head again, considering her words carefully before responding. Action is critical, he agreed, but action without listening can easily become shouting into a void. Several audience members nodded silently. A few clapped. A hesitant ripple, but a ripple nonetheless. Jasmine frowned, sensing the ground slipping again. She reached for control, speaking passionately. "I stand here today representing communities crushed under a system that wasn't designed to protect them. I'm not here to soothe anyone's feelings. I'm here to push until something changes." Her supporters erupted in applause, this time louder, firmer. Jasmine straightened her back. She felt the energy return. But Barron didn't flinch. He sat quietly through the applause, then spoke, voice clear but soft. "And I respect that fight." He waited. "Then but doesn't that change stand a better chance if people stay in the conversation? If even those you disagree with aren't driven away by hostility?" The room quieted again. His phrasing wasn't adversarial, it was inviting. A middle-aged man near the back, who had come wearing a Crockett campaign pin, crossed his arms thoughtfully. A young woman in the second row murmured to her friend, "He's not wrong." Even if I don't want to admit it, Jasmine was too skilled a politician not to notice. Her eyes scanned the audience. She could feel the divide, not left and right, but tension and reflection. Barron wasn't winning with policy. He wasn't even debating facts. He was winning with tone, with a presence that calmed the chaos instead of fueling it. This wasn't the fight Jasmine had prepared for. She turned toward him fully now. "Barron," she said, her voice cooling, "are you saying my passion is hostility?" A pointed question. The audience hushed. The host leaned in, eyes darting between them. Barron chose his next words carefully. "No, representative," he said gently. "I'm saying passion is powerful. But when it pushes others out of the room, it can't persuade." Another ripple of nods through the audience. Jasmine's pulse quickened. She could feel control slipping, not because Barron attacked, but because he refused to attack back. That was his strength. The camera caught Jasmine's subtle hesitation. She tried one last sharp line, "Barron, you can afford to be calm. Some of us don't have that luxury." That landed. Strong applause. A rallying cry for her base. But before it could build further, Barron simply nodded. "That's true," he said. "And maybe that's exactly why I should use that calm to listen better, and invite others to do the same." Silence again. Even her strongest supporters felt the shift. The host leaned forward, voice low but steady. "Barron, what would you say is your role here today?" A perfect moment for a defensive answer. But Barron didn't take it. "I'm here to remind people that dialogue still matters," he said simply. "That listening is not weakness, and that disagreement doesn't require disrespect." A few claps rose, and this time the applause was louder, broader, spreading across sections that had earlier cheered Jasmine exclusively. Jasmine took a breath. She realized this wasn't a debate anymore. This was a performance, and Barron was winning simply by refusing to perform. He didn't fight her. He didn't dismiss her struggle. He acknowledged it and invited the room to reflect on how they engaged with it. The cameras panned to audience members leaning forward, thoughtful phones lowered. Producers in the control room watched viewership numbers spike, especially online. Social media lit up. Didn't expect Barron to sound like that. He's calm. She's strong, but his calm is changing the mood. This is what dialogue should look like. Behind the scenes, Jasmine's staff exchanged glances. Some were alarmed, some intrigued. But Jasmine knew. She could feel it in her bones. Barron hadn't come prepared with legislation stats or partisan attacks. He had come prepared with something rarer: presence. And presence was winning the night. Jasmine leaned into her mic one last time before the commercial break. "Barron," she said, voice steady but tinged with challenge. "Let's see if calm words change systems." "I doubt they will." The host raised a hand gently. "And we'll be right back after this short break." The studio lights dimmed slightly as theme music played. But in that moment, in the brief pause before the cameras cut away, it was clear Barron Trump had shifted the air. And Jasmine Crockett, fierce and skilled, realized she was now facing a completely different kind of opponent. One she couldn't out-argue, outshout, or dismiss as inexperienced. A voice that spoke softly and yet was impossible to ignore. The cameras cut back in after the break, but the air in the studio felt different. Even viewers at home could sense it, a quiet tension beneath the polished smiles of the host Jasmine Crockett and Barron Trump. The host tried to lighten the atmosphere. "We're back," he said, smiling a little too broadly. "And the conversation? Well, it's taken an interesting turn." Jasmine chuckled politely, but it was tight calculated. She was gathering herself, recalibrating her strategy. Barron simply sat quietly, hands folded, posture calm. The audience, restless but attentive, waited to see who would seize control next. Jasmine spoke first. "Let's get back to the core issue," she said, her tone sharp but steady. "We're talking about justice reform, about marginalized people whose voices have long been ignored. This isn't an etiquette lesson." A smattering of applause followed, brief but still loyal. Barron didn't rush to reply. He let the applause fade naturally before leaning slightly toward the microphone. "I agree," he said softly. "This isn't about etiquette." His voice remained calm, no raised pitch, no defensive edge. "But the way we discuss justice," he continued, "sets the stage for whether people will stay in the conversation or walk away." That line worked its way through the room slowly. Not dramatic, but quietly persuasive. Jasmine inhaled sharply. "Barron, with all due respect, you've never faced systemic discrimination. You haven't sat in a courtroom watching someone punished more harshly just because of their skin color." A stronger round of applause this time. Jasmine's words hit deep and true. This was her territory, a place of lived experience where Barron could not follow. Or so she thought. Barron nodded, conceding the point without hesitation. "You're right," he said simply. "I haven't." But then, without pausing, he added, "And that's exactly why I'm listening right now." The words were unexpected. They disarmed not by argument, but by acknowledgement. The applause that followed was softer than Jasmine's, but broader, reaching parts of the audience that hadn't clapped for him earlier. The camera caught Jasmine blinking rapidly. For a brief second, her composure cracked, but only briefly. She leaned forward again, determined to keep control. "You can listen all you want," she said, "but what good is listening if it isn't followed by action, if it isn't followed by real reform?" Another round of applause, sharp, eager, rallying her base. Barron didn't interrupt. He waited. When the applause faded, he responded calmly. "I respect that point," he said. "Listening alone isn't enough, but action without understanding can lead us nowhere." The host jumped in quickly, trying to mediate. "This is fascinating," he said, looking between them. "Barron, Jasmine, both of you make compelling points, but let me ask this. What would either of you do to bridge the divide we're seeing right now, not just here, but across the country?" Jasmine seized the question instantly. "Bridge the divide," she echoed, her voice firm. "You can't bridge a divide until you acknowledge who built it and who benefits from it. Thunderous applause erupted. She stood taller. This isn't about making everyone comfortable, she continued, pointing briefly toward Barron without even looking at him directly. It's about making things right, even if it makes some people uncomfortable. The audience roared their approval. Barron nodded again. He didn't take offense. When the applause faded, he spoke soft but steady. And sometimes he said gently, the first step in making things right is ensuring everyone's still at the table to talk. A murmur rippled through the crowd. It wasn't applause. It wasn't jeering. It was something deeper reflection. Even Jasmine's supporters couldn't entirely dismiss the truth in that statement. The camera zoomed in on Barron's face. No arrogance, no defensiveness, just quiet resolve. Jasmine spoke again, trying to regain momentum. Talking is easy, she said, voice rising slightly. Living the reality is different. Another cheer, but Barron didn't waver. I'm not pretending it's the same, he said, but I also know that talking respectfully can change hearts. It can keep people listening who might otherwise walk away. Several people in the audience clapped, not many, but enough to be noticeable. The dynamic in the room was complex now. No longer simply her side versus his side. It was subtle, it was mixed, and Jasmine knew it. She wasn't losing her supporters, but she was sharing them now in a way she hadn't expected. The host leaned forward again. Representative Crockett, he said, it seems Barron's call for respectful dialogue has resonated with at least part of this audience. How do you respond to that? Jasmine smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I respond by saying this, she said firmly. Respectful dialogue must not come at the expense of truth. And the truth is, this system is broken for many, and polite conversation alone won't fix it. Applause again, strong reaffirming. Barron nodded respectfully. I agree, he said. That surprised her. That surprised almost everyone. Barron leaned forward slightly. But truth, he added, also needs trust. And trust is built when people feel heard. The words landed softly but powerfully. The audience fell quiet. A man in the second row who had stayed silent until now clapped twice. Then a few others joined. Not a standing ovation, not a roar, but real, genuine. Jasmine sat back in her chair. For the first time that evening, she hesitated before speaking. She realized that Barron hadn't come to win. He hadn't come with zingers or slogans. He had come with presence, and that was harder to fight. The host cleared his throat, sensing the delicate balance. We'll take another break, he said quickly, but don't go anywhere. This conversation isn't over. As the theme music swelled and cameras pulled back, Jasmine glanced sideways at Barron. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He just sat quietly composed, hands folded, eyes steady. It wasn't that Barron Trump had said something revolutionary. It was how he'd said it. Soft, calm, clear. And that had shifted the air in the room more powerfully than any applause line. The commercial break might have offered Jasmine a brief reprieve, but deep down she knew. When the cameras returned, the room would still belong to him. The studio lights brightened as the show returned from break. The tension hadn't dissipated, it had settled deep and silent like air before a storm. Jasmine Crockett sat upright, her expression sharpened, her voice prepared. But so did Barron Trump, his posture unchanged, his calm now unmistakably a strength. The host offered a polite smile to the camera. Welcome back, he said. We're continuing this extraordinary conversation between Representative Jasmine Crockett and Barron Trump, a dialogue that's clearly striking a chord. The audience murmured, waiting to see where this would go next. Jasmine wasted no time. She leaned in her tone, clipped but passionate. Barron, you've talked a lot about tone, about keeping dialogue open. But let me ask this, how do you suggest we bridge divides when history itself has been built on unequal ground applause? Strong. Barron nodded slowly. He didn't rush. Representative, he began softly acknowledging that history is critical. We have to face hard truths. But then he added, at the same time, how we face them matters too. Anger may be justified, but if it drives people away from the table, does it move us forward? The words landed gently, but their effect was sharp. A woman in the front row folded her arms, then slowly nodded. A man in the back, who had cheered Jasmine earlier, now leaned forward attentive. Jasmine felt that shift. She pressed harder. Barron, this isn't about driving people away. It's about refusing to coddle those who benefit from a broken system. We've waited long enough. We don't need calm words, we need action. A burst of applause from her supporters. Barron didn't flinch. Action is key, he agreed, but action that's grounded in respect can be stronger than action that's driven by resentment. It was subtle, not combative, and that subtlety was winning hearts slowly but surely. The audience was no longer entirely hers. They were listening to both of them now. And Jasmine, a veteran of the courtroom and campaign trail, recognized it for what it was the moment her advantage began to erode. The host, sensing this delicate balance, offered a prompt. Barron, many viewers are wondering, why did you even come here tonight? Why insert yourself into this debate? Barron smiled softly, the first true smile of the evening. I came, he said gently, because sometimes it takes a voice you don't expect to remind people that dialogue itself has value. A ripple of applause, not thunderous, but authentic. He continued, I didn't come to dominate this conversation. I came to show that listening doesn't weaken your argument, it strengthens it. His phrasing was deliberate, disarming. Jasmine tightened her grip on her pen. Listening alone won't fix what's broken, she replied, her voice edged with urgency. Empathy must lead to reform, or it's just performance. Strong applause. Jasmine's words resonated, but not like before. Barron waited for the applause to fade again. I agree, he said simply. Empathy without reform is empty, but reform without empathy is blind. That line sent a visible ripple through the audience. The woman in the front row, previously an eager supporter of Jasmine, clapped gently. Then a man 2 rows back joined. Then another. Jasmine felt it. This wasn't just about winning this conversation anymore. It was about holding the room, and Barron was doing it not by shouting, not by attacking, but by speaking with a quiet clarity that kept people leaning in. She leaned forward again, seeking to reclaim the moment. This country's wounds run deep, she said, voice strong. Words don't heal them, policies do. Barron nodded. True. Then, but words build trust, and without trust, policies fail. Again, soft applause. The host raised a hand gently. Barron, how do you see your role? You've admitted you don't have the lived experience Representative Crockett speaks of. So, what is your contribution here, really? It was a question designed to challenge him, a final test. Barron didn't hesitate. My role, he said, isn't to replace voices like Representative Crockett's. It's to add something that too often goes missing. Respect in disagreement, patience in dialogue. A reminder that even those who disagree need to stay at the table. There was no arrogance in his tone, just a quiet sincerity that carried across the room. Several audience members nodded. A woman near the aisle whispered, That's true, though. We need that, too. Jasmine heard it. She wasn't losing her base, but she wasn't holding them entirely either. She took a breath. Then, with a sharp smile, she fired back, Respect is easy from your seat, Barron. But when you've lived with injustice, respect alone won't save you. Applause strong again, but not universal. Not like before. Barron met her gaze calmly. That's fair, he said. And maybe that's why people like me need to listen first and speak less. That unexpected humility caught her off guard. It caught the audience too. Some clapped again. Others simply sat quietly reflective. Jasmine sensed the change. She was battling a style she hadn't prepared for, a style that didn't fight back, but absorbed tension and transformed it into poise. The host leaned forward again. We're running out of time, he said. One last question to both of you. What message do you hope viewers take away from tonight? Jasmine seized the moment. I hope they understand. She said passionately that polite words won't change the lives of marginalized people. That justice isn't about comfort, it's about courage. Applause, resilient, and determined. Barron waited, then spoke softly. I hope they understand, he said, that justice also depends on keeping people in the conversation, even when it's uncomfortable. Not applause this time, but a thoughtful silence. The kind that meant people were weighing his words carefully. The host smiled slightly. Well, he said, thank you both. This conversation has gone places we didn't expect, and I think our audience is better for it. The studio lights dimmed slightly, but the energy remained. The conversation wasn't over, not really. Not for the viewers at home who would replay these moments online. Not for the audience in the studio who had come expecting a showdown and found something more nuanced. Not for Jasmine, who knew she would have to work harder to reclaim the narrative. And certainly not for Barron, who had done something rare. He had shifted the tone of an entire conversation. Not with slogans, not with sharp attacks, but with patience, with respect, with presence. And in today's noisy political world, that presence was louder than any applause. As the credits rolled and the studio lights dimmed, the audience slowly began to disperse. But the conversation lingered in the air on their lips and across the social media feeds now buzzing with highlights of the night. Jasmine Crockett stood backstage with her team. One aide leaned in, phone in hand. "Jasmine, you're trending," he whispered, half hopeful. But even Jasmine could tell the mood was different. The clips going viral weren't just of her passionate pleas for justice. They were of Barron Trump sitting quietly responding without anger, his words measured and sincere. Meanwhile, Barron left the studio without fanfare. No entourage, no self-congratulation. A producer caught up to him outside the exit door. "You changed the room tonight," she said. Barron paused, smiled faintly. "I didn't come to change the room," he replied. "I came to stay in it." Back at the venue, audience members gathered in small groups. Some praised Jasmine's fire. Others reflected on Barron's calm. But nearly everyone admitted they hadn't expected a moment like this, a debate where respect, not shouting, had taken center stage. Across Twitter, a simple quote from Barron gained traction. "Justice depends on keeping people in the conversation even when it's uncomfortable." Thousands shared it. Some praised it, others mocked it, but all acknowledged its weight. And in homes across the country, people rewatched, and debated what they had witnessed, not just political talking points, but the tone itself. Jasmine, though disappointed, didn't waver. The next morning, she was back in her district meeting with community leaders, her purpose intact. "The fight for justice isn't won in sound bites," she reminded her team. "It's won with work." Barron, too, returned to relative quiet. No press tour, no celebratory statements, just a brief post. "Thank you for listening. Let's keep talking." That was enough. For while the broadcast had ended, the echo remained subtle, steady, a reminder that even in an era of noise, 1 minute of grace could shift a national conversation.